The Last Shadow on Mercy Road. The girl collapsed at his feet like a prayer whispered into dust. Ethan Cole had ridden past 1,000 pleas in his 38 years, drunks begging coins, widows seeking justice, children wanting fathers who'd never return. He learned to keep his eyes forward, his jaw set, his horse moving. But when those small fingers closed around his boot with the desperate strength of the dying, when that voice cracked through the Montana heat like breaking glass, something in him froze. Please don't ride away, please. Mama's dying and there's nobody else. The sun beat down. The road stretched empty in both directions. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan Cole stopped running. Welcome to a story of second chances beneath the unforgiving summer sky. If this tale moves you, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you about the day a man who'd lost everything found the one thing he'd stopped looking for, a reason to stay. The Montana Territory in July was a kind of hell that didn't need fire. The sun hammered down from a bleached sky, turning earth to powder and breath to labor. Even the wind, when it came, brought no relief, just carried the scent of sage and desperation across miles of cracked ground. Ethan Cole had chosen this route deliberately. The main road through Mercy was paved with questions he had no intention of answering. Out here, a man could ride for days and see nothing but distance. That suited him fine. Distance was honest. Distance didn't ask where you'd been or why you wore a gun like you knew how to use it. His horse, a gray mare he'd won in a card game outside Billings, picked her way along the rutted trail with the tired wisdom of an animal that understood hardship. Ethan kept his hat low, his canteen close, and his thoughts elsewhere. Somewhere back in Wyoming, maybe. Or further. Somewhere before the badge, before the mistakes, before he'd learned that justice and law weren't the same thing and that wearing one didn't guarantee the other. The girl appeared so suddenly he almost didn't see her. She came stumbling out of the heat shimmer like something conjured from dust itself, barefoot, her dress torn and sun-faded, her dark hair matted against a face burned red by exposure. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Maybe 9, small enough that the landscape dwarfed her, big enough to know terror when it came. She ran straight at him, legs churning, arms pumping, mouth open in a cry that the heat swallowed whole. Ethan pulled up, instinct moving his hand toward his gun before logic caught up. Not a threat, a child. Running like the devil himself was on her heels. She reached his stirrup and collapsed. Not dramatically, not with a swoon or a graceful fall. She just folded, knees buckling, hands scrabbling for purchase, body crumpling into the dust like something with all its strings cut at once. Her fingers caught his boot and held on with the kind of strength that comes from pure animal desperation. Please. The word came out broken, half sob, half gasp. Please don't ride away. Ethan sat perfectly still. The mare shifted beneath him, uneasy. His throat was dry, his mind already calculating distance, complications, entanglements. He'd made it a rule never to stop. 6 years of drifting had taught him that stopping meant questions, and questions meant lies, and lies meant eventually moving on anyway, but with more weight in your saddlebags. Please, her voice cracked. Mama's dying and there's nobody else. I've been walking since dawn and you're the first person, and please, mister, please. She dissolved into coughing, body shaking so hard her grip on his boot slipped. Ethan dismounted before he'd consciously decided to. His hands, rough, scarred, more familiar with violence than comfort, caught her shoulders before she face-planted into the hardpan. Up close she looked worse, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes sunken, skin hot enough to feel through her dress. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, possibly worse. He unstoppered his canteen with one hand, supporting her with the other. Slow, he said. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended, unused after days of silence. Too fast and you'll lose it. She drank like someone drowning, greedy and graceless, water spilling down her chin. He let her have 3 swallows before pulling it away. She whimpered, but didn't fight. Your mama, Ethan said. Where? The girl pointed west, toward a line of cottonwoods maybe 2 miles distant. The cabin, by the creek that dried up. She's burning up and she won't wake up right, and I tried to get help, but nobody would come, and... How long's she been sick? 3 days? Maybe 4. I don't... Time's all mixed up. 4 days of fever in this heat. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked west, then east toward the road that would take him to Idaho, to Oregon, to anywhere that wasn't here. The smart play was obvious. Give the kid the canteen, point her toward Mercy, ride on. A man could cover a lot of ground before sunset. A man could be across the territorial line by morning. But the girl's fingers had found his wrist now, and she was looking up at him with eyes that had already seen too much for someone so young. Eyes that knew what no looked like, what abandonment tasted like, what it meant when adults walked away because helping was hard and leaving was easy. "She's all I got," the girl whispered. "If she dies, I got nobody." Something in Ethan's chest, something he'd thought he'd buried deep enough that it couldn't claw back up, twisted sharply. He saw another girl, younger than this one, reaching for him. Heard another voice calling him back. Felt the weight of failure, of being too late, of discovering that sometimes your best wasn't nearly good enough. He swung back into the saddle and held down a hand. "What's your name?" "Lucy. Lucy Hale." "Well, Lucy Hale, let's go see about your mama." The relief that flooded her face was almost painful to witness. She took his hand, hers was so small it disappeared entirely in his grip, and he pulled her up behind him. She wrapped thin arms around his waist and pressed her face against his back. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Ethan turned the mare west. "I ain't much for miracles." The ride took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Lucy directed him with whispered instructions, too exhausted for full sentences. Left at the dead tree. Past the wash. Through the gap where the fence fell down. The land here bore the marks of hardship, overgrazed pastures gone to scrub, irrigation ditches cracked and empty, the skeletal remains of hope visible in every failed improvement. The cabin appeared gradually, first as a dark smudge against the shimmer, then as a definite structure. It was small, maybe 3 rooms built from local timber that had weathered to gray. The roof sagged in the middle. 2 windows, one covered with cloth, the other with what looked like a feed sack. A chicken coop stood empty. A small garden plot had gone to weeds. But the cottonwoods, those had survived. They clustered near what must have been the creek, their roots deep enough to find water even when the surface dried up. Their shade was the only mercy visible for miles. Ethan dismounted in that shade and lifted Lucy down. She swayed, nearly fell, caught herself on the stirrup. "Inside," he said. "Sit down before you drop." "Mama, I'll see to her. You sit." He didn't wait for agreement. The cabin door hung crooked on leather hinges, half open. Ethan pushed through into dimness and heat that hit like a physical thing. The air was thick, stale, tasting of sickness and desperation. He gave his eyes a moment to adjust. 1 room, main living space. A table, 2 chairs, a cook stove cold and empty. Shelves mostly bare. A trunk in the corner. Everything worn, mended, make-do. The kind of poverty that was quiet and dignified and absolutely merciless. A doorway led to the sleeping room. Ethan crossed to it, boots loud on the plank floor. The woman on the bed was dying. He'd seen enough death to recognize its approach, the way it settled into a body, claimed territory, prepared for final occupation. She lay on her back, covers thrown off, dress soaked with sweat, dark hair spread across a thin pillow. Her face was flushed deep red, lips cracked, breath coming in short, labored gasps. She was young, younger than him probably, maybe 30. Hard to tell with illness distorting features, but even fever couldn't completely hide the fact that she'd been pretty once. Still was, under the ravages. Fine-boned, delicate. The kind of woman who looked like she should be in a parlor somewhere, not dying in a sun-beaten cabin in the middle of nowhere. Ethan touched her forehead. The heat was shocking. Not human heat, but something fiercer, like touching metal left in the sun. Her eyes flickered open, brown, unfocused, seeing something that wasn't there. "James?" Her voice was a thread. "James, you came back?" "I ain't James." Ethan kept his voice low. "Name's Cole. Your girl Lucy brought me." "Lucy?" The name seemed to pull her toward consciousness. "Where?" "She's safe, outside. You need water and you need to cool down or you ain't gonna make it through sundown." Margaret Hale, he assumed that was her name, Lucy's mama, tried to focus on him, failed. Her head rolled to the side. "Nobody would help. I asked, sent Lucy to the neighbors. But we owe money, and they said, don't matter what they said, I'm here now. He didn't wait for her to process that. Back to the main room where Lucy had collapsed onto one of the chairs, head on the table. She looked up when he entered. She's real sick, ain't she? Yeah, no point in lying. I need to cool her down. You got any clean cloth? Sheets, towels, anything? Lucy pointed to the trunk. Mama keeps things there. The trunk held the remnants of a better life. Quilts too nice for daily use, a few pieces of clothing carefully folded, a child's dress that looked like it had been saved for special occasions. At the bottom, Ethan found what he needed. 2 old sheets, thin with age but clean. He tore one into strips. Where's your water supply? Well's out back. But the rope broke, and we can't reach down far enough, and I'll handle it. Ethan grabbed a bucket he'd spotted by the door. You stay inside, drink more water, not too fast. Outside, the heat was somehow worse for having been briefly escaped. Ethan found the well, a hand-dug shaft with a wooden cover half rotted away. Lucy was right. The rope had snapped, the bucket lost somewhere in the darkness below. He could hear water echoing, maybe 20 feet down. He went to his saddlebags and pulled out a coiled rope. Always carried rope, and whiskey, and ammunition. The essentials. 10 minutes of work got him a new bucket system rigged. The water that came up was cool, clean, tasting of stone and earth. He filled every container he could find, carried them inside, set Lucy to drinking again while he returned to the bedroom. Margaret was muttering now, lost in fever dreams. Words about drought, debts, men who made promises they didn't keep. Ethan tuned it out. He'd heard enough stories of hardship. They all had the same shape: hope, effort, circumstances beyond control, slow grinding down to nothing. He dipped the cloth strips in cool water, wrung them out, laid them across her forehead, her neck, her wrists. The heat of her skin dried them almost immediately. He re-wet them, reapplied, again and again. Slowly, mechanically, while the sun tracked across the sky and the cabin filled with the quiet sounds of suffering. By the time twilight came, Margaret's fever had dropped slightly. Not broken, but pulled back from the immediate edge. She'd stopped muttering, fallen into something that looked more like sleep than delirium. Ethan sat back, rolling his shoulders, feeling the ache of hours spent bent over a sickbed. Lucy appeared in the doorway, still pale, but steadier. She's holding on. Needs a doctor, though. Real medicine. There's a doctor in Mercy. Dr. Brennan. But he won't come without payment, and we don't have... Where's Mercy? East. 8 miles, maybe. But he won't... How much does he want? Lucy's face crumpled. $2? We owe him from before, when Mama broke her arm, and he said no more credit. Said next time it's cash first or nothing, and we don't have $2, we don't have anything. Ethan stood. His joints protested. His back ached. His throat was raw with dust and his eyes burned with exhaustion. He walked past Lucy to his saddlebags, dug into the inner pocket where he kept what passed for his savings, counted bills by touch in the fading light. $17. Everything he had. Everything he'd saved from 3 months of odd jobs, poker games, and carefully rationed living. He took out 5, folded them, pushed them deep in his pocket. Mister? Lucy's voice was small. What are you? Gonna ride into Mercy. Gonna bring back that doctor. But he won't. He will. Ethan moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. Lucy, your mama wakes up before I get back. You tell her I'm coming back. Hear me? You tell her someone's coming back. The girl nodded, eyes wide. Ethan stepped into the purple dusk, found his mare cropping at the tough grass near the cottonwoods, and swung into the saddle. East, Lucy had said. 8 miles. He could make that in less than an hour if he pushed. He touched his heels to the mare's flanks, and she moved out, understanding without words that this wasn't a leisurely ride. The night came down fast, the way it did on the plains, sudden as a curtain drop. Stars appeared in impossible numbers. The temperature dropped 20 degrees, but the earth still radiated stored heat. Ethan rode with his hand near his gun, eyes scanning the darkness. Not expecting trouble, but not ruling it out either. Mercy announced itself with lamplight and windows, the smell of cook fires, the sound of a piano badly played. It was bigger than Ethan had expected, maybe 300 people, maybe more. A main street with shops, a church, a school, 2 saloons. The kind of place that thought it was civilized because it had a sheriff and a newspaper. He found the doctor's house on the north edge of town. 2 stories, white paint, shutters that actually hung straight. Prosperity, in other words. Built on the backs of people who couldn't pay. Ethan dismounted, tied the mare, walked up the steps and knocked. Hard. A woman answered. Thin, gray-haired, suspicious. "We don't see patients after supper." "Your husband's a doctor, ain't he?" "Dr. Brennan is at supper. Come back tomorrow." "Woman's dying 8 miles west. Fever. 3-4 days. Kid no more than 8, trying to keep her alive. Your husband's going to come with me, and he's going to come now." The woman's face hardened. "Dr. Brennan doesn't make house calls without payment in advance. We've had too many people promise payment that never comes. If you can show—" Ethan pulled out the folded bills. $5. More than the 2 Lucy had mentioned, more than he should spend, more than he could afford. "This covers it?" The woman's expression shifted, not to kindness, but to business. "That'll do. Wait here." She disappeared. Ethan stood on the porch, hat in hand, listening to murmured conversation inside. A man's voice, irritated. The woman's, insistent. More back and forth. Finally, footsteps. Dr. Brennan was maybe 50, well-fed, wearing a vest and watch chain. He looked at Ethan the way you'd look at something that had interrupted dinner. "Catherine says there's an emergency. Woman with fever, bad fever, name's Margaret Hale." Something flickered across Brennan's face. Recognition, discomfort. "The Hale woman. Out past Cutter's Creek. You know her?" "I know she owes me money. Told her last time, no more credit." "I just paid you." Ethan kept his voice level. $5. That covers whatever she owes in tonight's visit. So get your bag and let's go." Brennan studied him. Ethan could see the calculation happening. The weighing of money received against inconvenience, the measuring of this stranger in worn clothes with a tied-down gun and eyes that had seen things polite doctors didn't want to think about. "You family?" "I'm the man who's taking you to see her. That going to be a problem?" A long pause. Then Brennan sighed. "I'll get my things." He disappeared inside. Ethan waited, every muscle tight. Part of him expected the doctor to just not come back, to find some excuse, to decide $5 wasn't worth the trouble. But 10 minutes later, Brennan emerged with a black bag and a coat despite the lingering heat. "I'll take my own horse." "Fine. Follow me." The ride back took longer, Brennan not being much of a horseman and the darkness making the rough trail treacherous. Ethan set a pace that was brisk without being dangerous, listening to the doctor grumble behind him, not caring. The stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere a coyote called, was answered, fell silent. They reached the cabin near midnight. Lamplight showed in the window. Lucy had lit one of the precious candles. Ethan dismounted, tied both horses, and led the way inside. Lucy had fallen asleep at the table, head on her arms. She jerked awake when they entered, eyes wild for a moment before focusing. "You came back," she whispered. "Said I would." Ethan nodded toward the bedroom. "Your mama's in there, Doc." Brennan moved past them without comment. Ethan heard him in the bedroom, the sounds of examination, rustling cloth, muttered observations, the clink of instruments from his bag. Lucy looked up at Ethan, questions in her eyes he couldn't answer. So he did what he could. Found the stove, got a fire going despite the heat, found coffee in a tin on the shelf, bitter and stale but serviceable, boiled water, made coffee strong enough to strip paint. When Brennan emerged 20 minutes later, Ethan handed him a cup. The doctor drank, made a face. "Strong. It's coffee, not perfume. How is she?" Brennan set the cup down. "Fever's high but breaking. She's severely dehydrated, malnourished, exhausted. Probably been working herself past the point of collapse for months. The fever's likely from an infection. I've given her quinine and left instructions for her care." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, set it on the table. "Dosages and timing. Keep her drinking water. Broth if you can manage it. Cool compresses when the fever spikes. She should live if she gets rest and actual food." If she gets rest and actual food. Easy words when you went home to a 2-story house and regular meals. "Anything else?" Ethan asked. Brennan looked at him, then at Lucy, then back. "Yes. These people are barely surviving. That woman in there has worked herself to the bone trying to keep this place going after her husband died. The neighbors won't help because she owes money all over the county. The child is half starved. I don't know who you are or why you're here, but if you're planning to ride off come morning, I ain't asked for your opinion on my plans, Doc. Then I'll give it anyway. Brennan's voice hardened. That woman deserves better than another man who shows up, plays hero for a night, and disappears. If you can't stay, do them a favor and leave now. False hope is crueler than no hope at all. The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He felt Lucy's eyes on him, felt the weight of Brennan's judgment, felt his own past pressing down like a physical thing. Every time he'd failed, every time he'd been too late, too slow, too human to save what needed saving. You done? Ethan asked quietly. For now. Brennan picked up his bag. I'll check on her in 2 days. The $5 you gave me covers tonight and that visit. After that, we'll settle accounts. He left without waiting for a response. The door clicked shut. The lamplight wavered. Lucy was still staring at Ethan. You are coming back, right? Her voice was barely audible. In 2 days, when he comes back, you'll still be here? Ethan looked at this child who'd already been abandoned by death, by neighbors, by a community that valued money over mercy. Looked at the bedroom doorway where her mother fought for life. Looked at his own hands, scarred and empty. Yeah, he heard himself say. I'll be here. Lucy's face crumpled. She started crying, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears of exhaustion and relief. And the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from holding yourself together when everything was falling apart. Ethan stood there, awkward, no idea what to do. Finally, he pulled out a handkerchief, handed it to her. Go on to bed. I'll keep watch on your mama. But you should sleep too. I'll sleep when I'm tired. Go on. She went, taking the lamp, leaving him in darkness, broken only by starlight through the window and the faint glow of the stove. Ethan poured himself more coffee, pulled a chair to the bedroom doorway, and settled in to watch. Margaret Hale slept fitfully, sometimes quiet, sometimes murmuring. Once she called for James again, her dead husband, Ethan assumed. Once she whispered Lucy with such desperate love it made his chest ache. He kept the compresses going, kept water nearby, kept his vigil. Somewhere past 3 a.m, her eyes opened, actually focused. She looked at him without recognition or fear, just quiet confusion. You're not Dr. Brennan. No, ma'am. Name's Ethan Cole. Your daughter found me on the road. Lucy. She tried to sit up, couldn't manage it. Is she? She's fine. Asleep in the other room. Drink this. He helped her drink, her hands too weak to hold the cup. She managed a few sips before falling back, exhausted by even that small effort. You brought the doctor, she said. Lucy told me. Said you paid him. Yes, ma'am. Why? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Because your daughter begged me. Because I'm tired of running. Because I failed someone once, and maybe if I don't fail you, it'll balance some cosmic ledger I don't even believe in. Seemed like the thing to do, he said instead. Margaret studied him with eyes that were still fever-bright but clearing. Men don't usually stop. Not for us. Not anymore. Well, I stopped. Will you stay? Dr. Brennan's medicine, his instructions. I can't manage it alone. Not yet. And Lucy, she's so young. She shouldn't have to... Her voice broke. I'm asking for help. I hate asking, but I'm asking. Ethan looked at this woman who'd been brought low by circumstance and hardship and the casual cruelty of a world that demanded strength but offered no support. Looked at the cabin around them, small and worn but clean, maintained with the kind of dignity that poverty couldn't quite erase. Looked at the doorway where a little girl slept, probably for the first time in days feeling something other than terror. He thought about the road east, the anonymity of distance, the safety of never stopping long enough to matter to anyone. I'll stay, he said, till you're on your feet. Relief washed across her face. Thank you. I can pay you. Not now, but when the crop comes in, if we can get water to the fields, we'll figure it out. Mr. Cole. Just Cole. Get some sleep, Mrs. Hale. Margaret. She was already fading, pulled back down into exhaustion. If I'm going to be asking favors, we should at least use first names. All right, Margaret, sleep now. She did, almost instantly. Ethan sat in the darkness, listening to her breathe, listening to the cabin settle, listening to the wind move through the cottonwoods outside. He'd stopped. Against every instinct, against years of careful practice, he'd stopped. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard Dr. Brennan's words. False hope is crueler than no hope at all. But he'd given his word to a dying woman and a terrified child. And whatever else Ethan Cole had lost over the years, his badge, his family, his faith in justice, he still had that. His word. For whatever it was worth. He settled deeper into the chair and waited for dawn. Dawn came slowly, the sky bleeding from black to purple to pale gold. Ethan had dozed in the chair, his body trained by years of light sleeping to wake at any change, a shift in breathing, a sound that didn't belong, the quality of silence that meant danger. But Margaret slept deeply now, her fever finally broken somewhere in the small hours, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been when he'd first seen her. He stood, joints protesting, and moved quietly to the main room. Lucy was curled in a quilt on the floor near the cold stove, one arm flung out, mouth slightly open. Something about the vulnerability of it, this child who'd walked miles in killing heat to find help, who'd held her world together with nothing but determination, made his throat tight. The cabin looked different in daylight. Not better exactly, but clearer. He could see now the careful mending in the curtains, the swept floor, the dishes stacked neatly despite their mismatched, chipped state. Poverty, yes, but not defeat. Not yet. Ethan stepped outside into air that was already warming, already promising another brutal day. The cottonwoods rustled overhead, their leaves silver green against the sky. He walked the property with the eye of someone who'd worked ranches, farms, hardscrabble homesteads from Wyoming to Oregon. Saw what was there and what wasn't. The well was good, deep, clean water, just needed proper rope and maintenance. The garden plot had decent soil under the weeds, enough sun, close enough to the house for tending. The pasture was overgrazed, but could recover with proper rotation. The chicken coop needed repair, but the structure was sound. The barn, more of a lean-to really, sagged dangerously, but could be shored up. The creek bed told a harder story. It carved through the property maybe 100 yards from the house, deep enough that it had run year-round once. But the channel was dry now, cracked mud and scattered stones. Upstream, Ethan could see where someone had tried to dig deeper, tried to find water that wasn't there anymore. He followed the bed west, away from the cabin, reading the land. A quarter-mile out, he found the problem. Someone had built a dam. Not a proper one, just logs, rocks, and mud shoved across a narrow point in the channel. Crude, but effective. It diverted the entire flow north, away from the Hale property, toward bottomland that showed green even in the drought. Cattle grazed there, fat and content. Good fence. New fence. Ethan stood looking at that dam for a long time. Water rights in Montana Territory were supposed to be based on prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. The Hales had been here first, from what Lucy had said. Her father had filed claim, built the cabin, started the farm before he died. But water was life, and life made men do ugly things. He headed back to the cabin, mind working. Found Lucy awake, sitting at the table looking lost. "Morning," he said. She jumped. "I didn't hear you. I thought maybe you'd left." "Still here." He moved to the stove, got the fire going again. "Your mama's fever broke. She'll sleep most of today, but she's through the worst of it." Lucy's face transformed. "Really? She's gonna be all right?" "If we take care of her proper. Which means food. What have you got?" The answer was devastating in its simplicity. Flour, maybe 2 cups, coffee, salt, a can of beans, some dried corn that looked like it dated from before her father's death. That was it. That was everything standing between this family and starvation. Ethan felt something old and familiar stir in his chest. Anger, but not the hot kind. The cold kind. The kind that didn't shout, didn't threaten, just started solving problems with methodical precision. "All right," he said. "Here's how this is going to work. I'm riding into Mercy. Going to get supplies, food, medicine, things we need. You stay here. Tend your mama like the doctor said. Can you do that?" Lucy nodded, solemn. "I can do that." "Good girl." He hesitated, then pulled out his remaining $12, counted out 10, left himself 2. "This should cover it. I'll be back by noon." "But that's That's your money. I'm spending it on food. Food I'm going to eat too. Ain't charity, it's common sense. He could see her struggling with pride, with gratitude, with the complicated shame of needing help. He'd felt it himself often enough. Finally, she just nodded. Thank you, Cole. The ride to Mercy took an hour. The town was busier in daylight. Freight wagons, riders, women with shopping baskets, men clustered outside the saloon even though it wasn't yet noon. Ethan tied his mare outside the general store and went in. The proprietor was a heavy-set man with mutton chop whiskers and suspicious eyes. Help you? Need supplies. Ethan pulled out his list, mental mostly, but specific. 20 pounds flour, 10 pounds beans, 5 pounds salt pork, coffee, sugar, canned milk, whatever vegetables you got that'll keep. Soap, lamp oil, rope. The man started pulling items, stacking them on the counter. Provisioning for a crew? Something like that. You got credit established here? I got cash. Ethan put the $10 on the counter. That cover it? The proprietor tallied grudgingly. $9.40, you got 60 cents left? Add whatever that'll buy in ammunition, 44 caliber. That got him a long look. Expecting trouble? Expecting to be ready if it comes. The man slid a box of cartridges across. Anything else? Ethan looked at the shelves, at things he couldn't afford. Saw a small bag of peppermint sticks in a jar by the register. Lucy probably hadn't tasted candy in months. Those peppermints, 2 sticks. That'll put you over. Ethan dug in his pocket, found a few spare coins he'd forgotten about, slid them across. The proprietor counted, shrugged, added the candy to the pile. You're that stranger staying out at the Hale place, the man said. It wasn't a question. Word travels fast. Doc Brennan's wife mentioned it. Said some drifter paid $5 to get him out there middle of the night. The proprietor's eyes were calculating. That widow owes money all over this county. You aiming to settle her debts? I'm aiming to get these supplies back before the heat gets worse. We done here? Reckon so. But the man was still watching as Ethan loaded everything into his saddlebags and a burlap sack he'd purchased. Fair warning, friend. The Hale woman's situation ain't simple. Her husband had troubles before he died. People with long memories. Troubles like what? The proprietor leaned on the counter. Like owing money to the wrong people. Like water rights disputes that never got settled proper. Like a widow and a kid sitting on land that's worth more to some folks than the lives living on it. Ethan straightened, his hand resting casual near his gun. That a warning or a threat? Information. Free of charge, seeing as you spent good money here. The man's voice dropped. Caleb Reeves owns the Running R, biggest spread in the county. He's got plans for this territory, and those plans don't include small homesteaders blocking access to water. James Hale wouldn't sell. Week later, he's dead, thrown from his horse, or so the story goes. Since then, Reeves has been patient, waiting for the widow to fail, waiting for her to starve out or give up. And if she doesn't? Then patience runs out. Usually does, eventually. Ethan absorbed this, filing it alongside what he'd seen at the creek. This Reeves, he the type to dam up a creek? The proprietor's expression shifted, not surprise, but confirmation. So you noticed? Yeah, that's his work. Illegal as hell, but who's going to enforce it? Sheriff's on his payroll, judge too, probably, and the Hale woman's got no money for lawyers. She's got me now. No offense, friend, but one drifter with a gun ain't much against Reeves and his crew. Maybe not. Ethan picked up his supplies. But I ain't planning to fight, just planning to help a family get back on their feet. And if Reeves don't see it that way? Ethan met his eyes. Then I guess we'll have a conversation about it. He left before the proprietor could respond, loaded the mare, and headed back into the building heat. But he'd only made it 2 blocks when a voice called out. You there, stranger. Ethan turned. 3 men on horseback ranged across the street in a way that wasn't quite threatening but wasn't friendly either. The one in the middle was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades in the sun. He wore good clothes, rode a good horse, and had the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. Caleb Reeves, the man said. Not a question. You're the one staying out at the Hale place. News spreads fast in small towns. It does. Reeves walked his horse closer. Up close, his eyes were pale blue, cold as January ice. Mind if I ask your business there? Private business. See, that's where you're wrong. Reeves leaned forward, saddle creaking. Anything involving the Hale property is my business. That land borders mine. The water situation affects my cattle. And that widow owes debts to half the county, including money her husband borrowed from me before he died. Ethan kept his voice level. Debts are between creditors and debtors. I'm just helping out temporarily. Temporarily, Reeves smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. That's good, because see, I've made Mrs. Hale a fair offer for her land. More than fair, considering its condition. She's refused, which is her right, but her situation ain't sustainable. When she finally accepts reality, I don't want complications from well-meaning strangers who don't understand the local situation. What I understand is a woman and a child need help. I'm providing it. No complications intended. One of the other riders, younger with a nasty scar across his jaw, spoke up. Maybe we should explain things clearer, boss. Reeves held up a hand. Not necessary, Tommy. Our friend here seems like a reasonable man. Back to Ethan. Let me be plain. This territory is growing, changing. Small homesteads like the Hales, they're relics. Can't compete, can't survive. Mrs. Hale's hanging on to something that's already dead. She just don't know it yet. When she figures it out, I'll be there with a fair price. Until then, I'd appreciate it if outside parties didn't encourage false hope. And if I disagree about what's false hope and what ain't? The temperature of the conversation dropped 20 degrees. Reeves's smile vanished. Then you'd be making a mistake, a serious one. I've been patient with Margaret Hale out of respect for her situation, but my patience ain't infinite, and it don't extend to strangers with guns playing hero. Ethan looked at him, at the two riders flanking him, at the town around them where people were carefully not watching this exchange. Thought about the dam on the creek, the dried up water, the systematic isolation of a widow who had no leverage and no allies. Appreciate the warning, he said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got supplies to deliver. He started to move past. Reeves's horse shifted, blocking his path. One more thing, Reeves said, voice dropping. James Hale was a stubborn man. Got him killed. I'd hate to see history repeat itself over something that ain't even your fight. The threat hung in the air, naked and clear. Ethan looked up at Reeves and saw something he'd seen before. Power that had gone unchecked so long it couldn't imagine being challenged. Men like that were dangerous because they believed their own supremacy, and belief made them capable of anything. James Hale's dead, Ethan said quietly. I ain't. Seems like that might matter. He pushed past the horse before Reeves could respond, kept walking, felt their eyes on his back the whole way. Didn't turn, didn't hurry, just walked steady to his mare, mounted up, and rode out. But his hand didn't leave his gun until he was clear of town. The ride back gave him time to think. About what he'd learned, about what was coming, about the fact that he'd somehow gone from planning to drift through Montana to standing between a powerful rancher and a widow with nothing. Should walk away, the rational part of his mind said. This ain't your fight. This ain't your family. You already did more than most would. Get them the supplies, make sure they're stable, then ride out before it gets complicated. But it was already complicated. Had been since Lucy's fingers closed on his boot and he'd made the choice to stop. He reached the cabin around noon, like he'd promised. Lucy must have been watching because she burst out the door before he'd even dismounted. You came back! I was worried when it got late. Noon ain't late. I said noon. He started unloading supplies. How's your mama? She woke up for a little bit, drank some water, asked about you. What did you tell her? That you went for supplies, that you'd be back. Lucy grabbed a bag, struggling with the weight. She cried a little. Happy crying, I think. They carried everything inside. Margaret was awake, propped against the wall, looking weak but present in a way she hadn't been before. When Ethan entered, her eyes found him immediately. Mr. Cole. Ma'am, told you, it's just Cole. Cole, then. She watched him set down supplies. Lucy said you went into town. That must have been expensive. Had money saved. Might as well spend it on something useful. I will pay you back. I know you don't know us. You don't have any reason to trust we're good for it, but I swear, Margaret. He pulled out a chair, sat down so he wasn't looming over her sickbed. Let's talk plain. I went into town, bought supplies, had a conversation with Caleb Reeves. Her face went pale. He found you? He found me. Or I found him. Don't matter which. He made his position clear. Wants your land, thinks you'll eventually sell, doesn't appreciate complications. Margaret's hands twisted in the quilt. I won't sell. I know that's probably foolish. I know it'd be easier, but this was James's dream. Our dream. And Lucy, she was born here. This is her home, and I can't just... Her voice cracked. I can't give up, even when it's smart to. Even when I should. Didn't say you should. Asked what you wanted. I want to keep my home. I want my daughter to grow up here. I want the creek running again and the garden growing and... She stopped, laughed bitterly. I want impossible things. Creek ain't impossible. Reeves dammed it up about a quarter-mile west, diverted the whole flow to his bottomland. Margaret stared. He what? Built a dam. Illegal, probably, but effective. That's why your water dried up. He can't do that. We have prior rights. James filed proper... Paper rights don't mean much when the other party's got money and guns and the law in his pocket. Ethan stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dry creek bed. But dams can be removed. Silence. Then quietly, you'd do that? Risk confronting Reeves over water rights that ain't even yours? I'd do that to help a family keep their home. There a difference? Cole. Margaret's voice was steady now, stronger. I appreciate everything you've done, more than I can say. But Reeves, he's dangerous. People who cross him, bad things happen. James wouldn't bend and... She stopped, swallowed hard. His horse came back without him. They said it was an accident. Said he must have been thrown. But James was the best horseman I ever knew. He didn't get thrown. Ethan turned to face her. You saying Reeves killed him? I'm saying I lost my husband in a very convenient accident right after he refused to sell. I'm saying I can't lose... She looked at Lucy, who'd gone very still. I can't lose anyone else. So if helping us means putting yourself in danger, maybe you shouldn't. Little late for that. Already had the conversation with Reeves. Already let him know I ain't moving on. Ethan pulled out the peppermint sticks, handed them to Lucy. Sides. I got a stubborn streak. Comes out when people try to bully folks who can't fight back. Lucy took the candy like it was treasure, eyes huge. Margaret watched this small transaction, this tiny kindness, and something in her expression broke and reformed. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for strangers? Ethan thought about his daughter, 6 years old, reaching for him the last time he'd seen her. Thought about arriving too late to stop what happened. Thought about every time since when he could have helped someone and didn't because getting involved meant pain. Maybe I'm tired of walking past people who need help, he said. Maybe I figure I got skills that are useful for something other than drifting. Maybe I just... He paused, searching for words. Maybe I just need to prove to myself I ain't completely used up yet. Margaret nodded slowly. Then I won't ask you to leave. But I won't lie to you either. This won't be easy. Reeves won't stop. And we don't have much to offer in return. Don't need much. Roof over my head while I'm here, food when there's food to share, work that needs doing. He met her eyes, and maybe the chance to do something right for once. That worth enough? More than enough. She settled back against the wall, exhausted. There's a room out back of the cabin. Was supposed to be storage, but James never finished it. You can stay there if you don't mind roughness. I've slept worse places. Lucy had been quiet through all this, peppermint stick clutched in one hand, watching the adults talk about things too big for her, but understanding enough. Now she spoke up. Are you going to tear down the dam? Ethan looked at her, at this child who'd already learned that water meant life, that power crushed weakness, that sometimes the world was unfair and you either fought or died. Yeah, he said, I'm going to tear down the dam, but not today. Today we're going to get your mama healthy, get some food in all of us, make sure this place is secure. Then we'll deal with the water. And when we deal with the water, Reeves will come. It wasn't a question. Lucy said it like fact, like she'd learned already that good actions brought consequences. Probably, Ethan agreed. But we'll be ready. And he'll learn that pushing around a sick widow and a little girl is different than dealing with someone who pushes back. Lucy studied him with old eyes in a young face. Then she nodded, satisfied, and carefully unwrapped her peppermint stick. The afternoon passed in necessary work. Ethan cleared the storage room. It was barely bigger than a cell, with a dirt floor and gaps in the walls, but it had a roof and space for a bedroll. He transferred his gear, including the rifle he'd kept wrapped in oilcloth, the revolver he wore, and the knife he kept in his boot. Tools of a trade he'd hoped to leave behind. In the main cabin, Lucy worked under his direction to prepare food. Real food, not the desperate scraps they'd been surviving on. Beans soaking, salt pork sliced thin, bread started from the flour. Simple things, but to people on the edge of starvation, a feast. Margaret slept through most of it, her body finally able to rest now that crisis had passed. When she woke in the evening, Ethan brought her broth and bread, watched her eat slowly, carefully, like someone remembering what food tasted like. "This is good," she said, surprised. "It's beans and pork. Ain't exactly fine dining." "To us it is." She ate another spoonful. "Cole, about the dam. When you do something about it, he'll retaliate. You know that." "I know." "And you're still planning to?" "Can't farm without water. Can't survive without farming. Math's pretty simple." Margaret set down the bowl. "I should tell you something. About James, about how he died." Ethan pulled up a chair. "All right." "It was October, 18 months ago. He'd gone into town, talked to a lawyer about the water situation, got confirmation we had prior rights, that Reeves couldn't legally divert the creek, came home planning to file a complaint, get the territorial judge involved." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Next morning he saddled up to check the north fence line. Routine work. He'd done it 100 times. She paused, breathing careful. Ethan waited. His horse came back at sunset. Alone. Saddle empty, bridle torn. We found James at the bottom of a ravine, neck broken. His horse, Sam, gentlest animal you ever met, had a bloody spur mark on his flank. Fresh, like someone had jabbed him hard enough to make him bolt. And the sheriff? Said it was an accident. Said James must have been careless, spooked the horse somehow, closed the investigation in 3 days. Margaret's eyes were dry but fierce. But I know my husband, I know his horse, and I know timing. A man doesn't die in a convenient accident the day after he threatens legal action against the most powerful rancher in the territory. No, Ethan agreed quietly. He doesn't. So when I say this is dangerous, I mean it. Reeves has killed before. He'll kill again if he thinks he needs to. Ethan absorbed this, adding it to everything else he knew about Caleb Reeves. Rich, connected, ruthless, and willing to commit murder for water and land. Then we'll be careful, he said, and we'll be ready. You think being ready is enough? I think doing nothing guarantees losing. Doing something at least gives you a chance. He stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start putting this place back together. That night, lying on his bedroll in the rough storage room, Ethan stared at darkness and thought about choices. He could still leave, take what was left of his money, ride north, be in Idaho before anyone noticed, live to drift another day. But Lucy's face kept appearing in his mind, and Margaret's quiet desperation, and the image of a dam blocking water that should run free, built by a man who thought power meant the right to take whatever he wanted. Ethan had been a lawman once, had believed in justice, in protection, in standing between the strong and the weak. That belief had cost him everything, his badge, his family, his faith that doing right mattered. But lying there in the darkness, listening to the wind through cottonwoods, he felt something old stirring. Not belief exactly. Not yet. But maybe the memory of belief. The ghost of the man he used to be, whispering that some things were worth the risk. He closed his eyes and waited for sleep, knowing tomorrow would bring work, knowing eventually it would bring confrontation, knowing he'd already chosen his side whether he admitted it or not. In the main cabin, Margaret lay awake too, listening to her daughter's peaceful breathing, feeling strength slowly returning to her body. She thought about the stranger sleeping in her storage room, about the kindness he'd shown, the risk he was taking, the fact that he'd stopped when everyone else had ridden past. She didn't know if they could win against Reeves. Didn't know if the dam could be removed, if the water could be reclaimed, if her small piece of land could survive against the tide of consolidation sweeping the territory. But for the first time in 18 months, she wasn't alone. For the first time since James died, someone was fighting alongside her instead of waiting for her to fail. It wasn't hope exactly. Not yet. But it was close. And in the darkness of that rough cabin, with heat still radiating from the earth and stars wheeling overhead, close to hope felt like enough. The next week passed in the rhythm of hard work and careful watching. Ethan rose before dawn each day when the air was still cool enough to breathe without effort, and set about repairing what neglect and hardship had broken. The chicken coop came first: new wire, reinforced posts, a proper door that latched. He rode into Mercy and traded 2 days' labor at the livery for 6 hens and a rooster, brought them back in a crate tied to his saddle. Lucy's face when she saw them was worth every blister. "Real chickens," she breathed like he'd brought her diamonds. "Real eggs soon enough," he said. "You'll need to tend them morning and night. Can you handle that?" She nodded so hard her braids bounced. "I can handle it." Margaret grew stronger each day, the fever's damage slowly reversing under the influence of food, rest, and medicine. By the 4th day, she was sitting up for hours at a time. By the 6th, she was walking to the table, to the door, testing her limits. Ethan watched her recovery with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many people push too far too fast, and he made sure she didn't overdo it even when her pride demanded otherwise. "I'm not an invalid," she protested on the 7th morning, when he'd insisted she rest instead of helping with the garden. "No, ma'am, you're not. You're someone recovering from nearly dying, which means you rest when rest is needed." He softened it with a slight smile. "Besides, Lucy and I got this handled." They did too. The girl worked like someone twice her age, pulling weeds, hauling water from the well, learning without complaint. She showed him where her mother had planted before the drought hit hardest. Tomatoes here, beans there, squash in the far corner. Most of it had died, but some roots remained viable. With water and care, they might recover. But water was the problem. The well provided enough for drinking and cooking, for the garden if they were careful, but the fields needed more, needed the creek running like it had before Reeves built his dam. And that reckoning was coming, Ethan knew. Coming soon. He saw the signs, riders passing on the ridge to the north, too far to identify but close enough to know they were being watched. Tracks near the property line that hadn't been there the day before. Once Lucy came running from the creek bed, breathless and scared. "There was a man," she gasped, "on a horse. He didn't say nothing, just sat there looking at our cabin. Then he rode off." "What'd he look like?" "Big. Had a scar on his face, right here." She traced a line down her jaw. Tommy, from that day in town, one of Reeves's men, watching, waiting, making sure they knew they were being observed. Ethan didn't mention it to Margaret, but he started sleeping lighter, his gun within reach, his instincts tuned to every sound that didn't belong. And he began planning. On the 8th night, after Lucy had gone to bed and Margaret sat at the table with coffee she was finally strong enough to drink, he laid it out. "Tomorrow night," he said quietly, "I'm going to take down that dam." Margaret's cup stopped halfway to her lips. "Tomorrow?" "Moon'll be near full. Enough light to work by, not so bright I'll be easy to spot. And waiting longer just gives Reeves time to prepare. He already knows you're here. Already knows what you're planning. Suspecting and knowing are different things. Right now he's watching, trying to decide if I'm serious or just playing at being helpful before I drift on." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Taking down the dam answers that question. Makes everything clear. And then? Then he'll come. But by then the water will be flowing again, and that changes things. Gives you leverage. Proves your rights are worth defending." Margaret set down her cup, both hands flat on the table like she needed to steady herself. "Cole, I can't ask you to do this. If something happens to you because of us, you're not asking. I'm offering." He met her eyes. "I told you, I got a stubborn streak, and I don't like seeing people pushed around by those who think money and power mean they can take whatever they want. Even if fighting back might get you killed? I've been alive 38 years. Spent the last 6 just passing through, not mattering to anyone, not making a difference. Maybe it's time I did something that counts, even if it's risky." She studied him in the lamplight, this man who'd appeared from nowhere and decided to stand with them against forces that had crushed stronger people. "You're not just doing this for us, are you? There's something else. Something you're trying to make right." Ethan looked away, out the window at darkness. "Had a family once. Wife. Daughter. I was a deputy marshal in Wyoming. Thought I was doing important work, keeping people safe. Then one day I wasn't there when they needed me. Wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't enough, period." His voice stayed level, but the words cost him. "My daughter was 6 when she died. Would have been 12 now. Sometimes I wonder who she'd have become. Margaret's breath caught. Cole, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Sympathy don't change it. Nothing changes it. He brought his gaze back to her. But maybe helping you and Lucy stay safe, keeping this place going, maybe that's not redemption, but it's something. It's better than drifting. They sat in silence, the lamp burning low, the night sounds filtering through the walls. Finally, Margaret spoke. Then be careful, please. Lucy's already lost her father. We can't lose you too. I'll be careful. But Margaret, you need to understand something. Once I do this, once that water flows again, Reeves won't back down. He'll escalate. So you need to be ready. Keep Lucy close, keep the rifle loaded, don't open the door unless you know who's knocking. I understand. And if something does happen to me, if things go wrong, you take Lucy and you ride to Mercy. Find Dr. Brennan, tell him everything. He's no friend of Reeves. He'll help you get somewhere safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not, but best to have a plan anyway. Margaret nodded, then stood and crossed to the small shelf where she kept the few precious things that had survived hardship, a music box that didn't play anymore, a photograph of her and James on their wedding day, a leather-bound Bible her mother had given her. She pulled out a folded paper, brought it back to the table. This is the deed to our property. And this, she unfolded another document, is the water rights filing James made with the territorial office. Legal proof that we have first claim to the creek. She pushed them toward Ethan. If Reeves comes while you're gone, if he tries to claim we're trespassing or stealing water, these prove otherwise. Ethan looked at the papers, at the careful handwriting, the official stamps, evidence that might not matter in the face of guns and intimidation, but evidence nonetheless. Keep them safe, he said. Somewhere he won't think to look if he comes searching. I will. She paused. James used to say that the law was supposed to protect people like us, that doing things right, filing proper, following rules, that it mattered, but when he needed the law, it wasn't there. The law is only as good as the people enforcing it. When sheriffs and judges are bought, paper don't mean much. Then why do this? Why risk yourself for something that might not even matter? Ethan thought about that, about justice versus law, about doing right even when the system was broken, about the difference between legal and moral. Because water flowing to people who need it matters regardless of what some corrupt sheriff thinks. Because a girl deserves to grow up in her own home because, he met Margaret's eyes, because somebody has to stand up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was still weak, still recovering, but steady. Then may God keep you safe tomorrow night. He didn't tell her he'd stopped believing in God's protection around the time he buried his family, just squeezed her hand briefly and nodded. The next day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Ethan kept busy with work, but his mind was already at the dam, planning angles of approach, exit routes, what tools he'd need. Lucy sensed something was happening, kept looking at him with worried eyes, but didn't ask. Margaret moved through the day quietly, cooking, mending, pretending everything was normal. As evening fell, Ethan prepared. He checked his guns, loaded them fresh, made sure his knife was sharp, gathered rope, a small axe, a pry bar he'd fashioned from scrap metal, wore dark clothes, left behind anything that might reflect moonlight. He moved with the careful precision of someone who'd done dangerous things before and knew that preparation was the difference between success and dying. Lucy caught him as he was heading out to the storage room. You're going tonight, aren't you? To fix the water? No point lying to her. Yeah. Will you come back? The question hit harder than it should have. This child who'd already lost so much, already learned that adults left and didn't return, asking the only question that mattered. I'm planning to, he said honestly. Can't promise nothing in life, Lucy. But I'm planning to come back, and I'm pretty good at doing what I plan. She nodded, solemn. Then quickly, before he could react, she hugged him, fierce and tight, her small arms around his waist. He stood frozen for a moment, unused to affection, unsure how to respond. Then carefully, awkwardly, he patted her shoulder. Go on inside now. Help your mama. And Lucy, whatever happens, you take care of her. She needs you strong. I will. She pulled back, swiped at her eyes. You take care too. He watched her go, feeling something shift in his chest. Dangerous, that. Caring made you vulnerable, made you hesitate, made you think about consequences instead of just acting. But it also made you fight harder, made you careful, made you come back because someone was waiting. Full dark came around 9. Ethan waited another hour, letting the town settle, letting anyone watching grow bored or sleepy. Then he saddled the mare, secured his tools, and rode out quietly. The moon was rising, 3/4 full, bright enough to see by once his eyes adjusted. He avoided the main trail, took a longer route through the scrub, approached the dam from downstream, moved slow and careful, stopping often to listen. The night was alive with sound, insects, small animals, the wind through grass, but nothing human, nothing threatening. The dam appeared as a dark mass blocking the creek channel, maybe 30 feet wide, 6 feet high at the center. Crude construction, logs and rocks, and packed earth. It had probably taken Reeves's men 2 days to build. Ethan figured he could tear it down in 2 hours if he worked fast and luck held. He dismounted well back from the structure, tied the mare where she could graze, approached on foot. Up close, the dam was even shoddier than he'd thought. No real engineering, just brute force. Pile enough material until the water stopped. The upstream side showed pooling, a small reservoir that fed the diversion channel north toward Reeves's land. The downstream side, the Hale side, was dry except for scattered puddles going stagnant. Ethan studied the structure, looking for weak points. Found them. The center, where logs bridged the narrowest part of the channel, took the most pressure. Remove those logs, and the whole thing would start to fail. Water would do the rest. He started working. The logs were heavy, waterlogged, wedged tight. He used the pry bar, levering, shifting, fighting for every inch. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cooling temperature. His hands blistered, bled, kept working. The first log came free with a groan of shifting wood and released a trickle of water that quickly became a stream. That's when he heard the horses. Ethan froze, listening. 2 riders, maybe 3, coming from the north. Moving casual but purposeful. Patrol, probably. Reeves would have men checking his water supply regularly, making sure no one interfered. He had maybe 2 minutes before they arrived. Not enough time to finish, but enough to do damage. Ethan attacked the second log with desperate speed, prying, pulling, feeling it start to give. The water pressure helped, pushing from behind, trying to escape. The log shifted more, came loose in a rush that nearly knocked him down. Water poured through the gap, not a flood yet, but substantial flow. The dam groaned, settling, beginning to fail under the new pressure distribution. Given time, it might collapse on its own. But time was what he didn't have. The riders appeared on the rise to the north, silhouetted against the moon. 3 of them. They saw him immediately. No way to hide, no cover, just Ethan standing in the creek bed with a pry bar and obvious intent. "Hey!" One of them kicked his horse into motion, the others following. "Stop right there!" Ethan dropped the pry bar, ran for his horse. Behind him, shouts, the sound of pursuit. He reached the mare, grabbed the saddle horn, swung up. A gunshot cracked, the bullet whining past somewhere to his left. Warning shot, maybe, or bad aim in moonlight. He didn't wait to find out which. Heels to the mare's flanks, and she leaped forward, understanding danger without needing explanation. They crashed through brush, over rough ground, Ethan leaning low, giving the horse her head. Another shot, further behind this time. The riders were pursuing, but their horses were tired from patrol, couldn't match his mare's fresh energy. He risked a glance back. 3 shapes falling behind, one of them pulling up. They weren't going to catch him, but they'd seen him clear, would recognize him if they got close enough. Ethan turned west, away from the Hale cabin, leading them away from Margaret and Lucy. Let them chase him, let them think he was running for the territorial line. After 20 minutes of hard riding, he cut south, then east, circling wide. Lost them in a maze of washes and rock formations, doubled back on his own trail, finally headed home when he was sure no one followed. His heart hammered, his hand shook with spent adrenaline, but he was alive. And behind him, water was flowing. He reached the cabin near midnight, approached cautious in case Reeves had sent men here too. But the place was quiet, dark except for a single lamp in the window. Margaret must have stayed up, waiting. He took care of the mare first, rubbing her down, checking for injuries, giving her grain she'd earned. Then he went inside. Margaret stood from the table as he entered, took one look at his face, and knew. "You did it." "Started it, took out enough of the dam that the water's flowing again. Whether it holds, whether it stays open, That depends on what Reeves does next. His men saw you? 3 of them. Chased me, but I lost them. They'll report back. He'll know for certain it was me. Margaret crossed to him, looked at his hands, bleeding, blistered, torn up from the work. Without a word, she went to the shelf, brought back clean cloth, and the bottle of whiskey Ethan had bought for sterilizing wounds. She poured it over his hands and he hissed at the burn, but didn't pull away. "Thank you," she said quietly, wrapping the cloth. "For doing this. For risking yourself. Water's not fully flowing yet. He might rebuild the dam tomorrow. Might come here instead, try to end this direct. Then we'll face it together." She finished bandaging, met his eyes. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ethan nodded, too tired for words. He could feel exhaustion pulling at him, the adrenaline crash leaving him hollow. But there was something else, too, something he hadn't felt in years. The satisfaction of having done something that mattered, of having stood against power and survived, of having protected people who needed protecting. "Get some sleep," Margaret said. "Tomorrow might be difficult." "Tomorrow's definitely going to be difficult. Question is how difficult." He was right. Dawn brought the answer. Ethan woke to the sound of horses, many horses, approaching fast. He was on his feet with his gun drawn before he was fully conscious, moving to the window. 6 riders coming up the trail, Reeves in the lead, his face set and hard. They weren't bothering with subtlety anymore. This was confrontation, direct and deliberate. Margaret appeared from the bedroom, Lucy behind her, both pale but steady. "Is it?" "Yeah." Ethan checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded. "Stay inside. Lock the door behind me. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Cole?" "Margaret, please, trust me." She hesitated, then nodded. Lucy grabbed her hand, scared but silent. Ethan stepped outside, closed the door, heard the bolt slide home. He walked to the middle of the yard, rifle held casual but ready, and waited. Reeves reined in 20 feet away, his men spreading out in a loose semicircle. 6 guns against 1. Bad odds, but Ethan had faced worse. The rancher looked at him with cold fury barely contained. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Reeves said. "I can't decide which." "Don't have to be either to tear down an illegal dam." "That dam was on my property, diverting water I have rights to. Water that belongs to the Hales by prior appropriation. You know it, I know it, and if we got ourselves an honest judge, he'd know it too." Reeves's jaw tightened. "I made you a simple offer. Walk away. This wasn't your fight. But you couldn't do that, could you? Had to play hero, had to interfere where you weren't wanted." "Mrs. Hale wanted help. I provided it. Seems pretty straightforward. And now you've destroyed property, trespassed, and assaulted my men with intent to flee. That's serious crimes, Mr. Cole." Ethan almost laughed. "Your men chased me after I removed an illegal obstruction from a waterway. Don't talk to me about crimes when you're standing here with 6 guns trying to intimidate a widow into selling land she don't want to sell." One of the riders, Tommy with the scar, spat into the dust. "Let me handle this, boss. 1 bullet, problem solved." "No." Reeves held up a hand, eyes never leaving Ethan. "Mr. Cole here thinks he's defending justice. He thinks tearing down my dam makes him righteous." A cold smile. "But here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Today. Right now. Take your horse and whatever belongings you've got and ride out of this territory. You do that, we forget this happened. And if I don't? Then you'll discover that accidents happen in Montana. Tragic accidents. Like what happened to James Hale when he wouldn't be reasonable." The threat was naked, clear, unambiguous. Margaret had been right. Reeves had killed before. Would kill again. Was offering Ethan one chance to walk away before violence became inevitable. "That's your offer?" Ethan kept his voice steady. "Leave or die. That's reality. This land, this water, it's going to be mine. The only question is how much trouble happens before that's settled. I'm giving you a chance to avoid being part of that trouble." Ethan looked at the 6 men, at their guns, at the hard certainty in their faces, looked at the cabin behind him where a woman and child waited, trusting him to protect them, looked at the creek in the distance where water was flowing again because he'd made it flow. He thought about his daughter, about arriving too late, about 6 years of running from the fact that he'd failed when it mattered, About the choice between safety and standing for something, between drifting and staying, between the easy path and the right one. No, he said. Reeves blinked. No? No, I ain't leaving. Mrs. Hale needs help. I'm providing it. The water's hers by right. I helped her reclaim it. And you threatening me just makes me more determined to stay. The temperature dropped. Tommy's hand moved toward his gun. Two other riders shifted in their saddles, ready. Reeves's face went dark with rage, barely controlled. You're choosing to die for people you don't even know? I'm choosing to do something right for once. If that gets me killed, at least I'll die for something that matters instead of just fading away in some nameless town. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension stretched thin as wire, ready to snap. Ethan knew he was seconds from dying, knew 6 guns would cut him down before he could fire twice, knew this was likely his last sunrise. But he also knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. Not again. Then, from inside the cabin, a sound. The bolt sliding. The door opening. Margaret stepped out, Lucy beside her. They crossed the yard and stood next to Ethan, Margaret holding the old rifle that had been James's, Lucy gripping her mother's skirt, but standing straight and unafraid. He's not alone, Margaret said, her voice clear and strong. This is my land, my water, my home. And I'm not selling, not leaving, not backing down. Whatever you do to him, you'll have to do to us too. Reeves stared at her, then at Lucy, then back at Ethan. The calculation was visible. Could he kill a woman and child in cold blood, here in daylight, with witnesses? Would his men even follow that order? How far was he willing to go? The standoff held for seconds that felt like hours. Then Reeves pulled his reins, his horse backing up a step. This isn't over, he said, voice like gravel. You've made your choice. Live with the consequences. He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. They disappeared over the rise, dust settling in their wake, leaving Ethan, Margaret, and Lucy standing in the yard, alive, shaking, together. Margaret lowered the rifle, her hands trembling. Did that really? Yeah. Ethan's voice came out rough. You just stood down Caleb Reeves. That took courage. It took desperation. She looked at him, eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. And it took you. If you hadn't stayed, hadn't stood with us. But I did stay, and I'm not going anywhere. Lucy buried her face in her mother's skirt, finally allowing herself to cry. Margaret held her daughter with one arm, still gripping the rifle with the other, looking at Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, relief, something deeper. He'll be back, she said. I know, but we'll be ready. Ethan looked at the creek in the distance, at the water flowing free again. And we proved something today. Proved that standing together means something. Proved that power can be faced, even when the odds are bad. What do we do now? Now we prepare, fortify, get ready for whatever comes next. He met her eyes. And we remember that we're not alone anymore. Whatever Reeves throws at us, we face it together. Margaret nodded slowly, Lucy still clinging to her, the 3 of them standing in the yard as the sun climbed higher and the day's heat began to build. They'd won this round. But the war was just beginning, and all of them knew it. The water returned like a promise kept. By noon that day, the creek bed that had been dust and memory was running clear again, not the full flow it had known before the drought, but enough. Enough to fill the irrigation ditches James Hale had dug 3 years earlier. Enough to reach the garden, the fields, the dry earth that had been waiting. Lucy ran alongside it, laughing for the first time since Ethan had known her, her bare feet splashing in mud that was forming as parched ground drank deep. But Ethan didn't celebrate. He spent the afternoon making the cabin defensible, his mind working through scenarios, angles of attack, how 6 men with guns might approach if they came back with violence instead of threats. He reinforced the door with boards scavenged from the sagging barn, checked sight lines from the windows, moved supplies away from outer walls where bullets might penetrate. Margaret watched him work, understanding without words that preparation was the only shield they had. You think he'll come tonight? She asked, handing him nails. Don't know, might wait. Let us think we're safe, then hit us when we've relaxed. Ethan hammered another board into place. Or might come fast before we're ready. Man like Reeves, hard to predict when pride's involved. He won't let this stand. What we did today, standing up to him in front of his men. He can't afford to look weak. No, he can't. Ethan stepped back, examining his work. Not perfect, but better. Which is why we need help, need witnesses, need people who'll know what happened if things go wrong. Margaret's face tightened. The neighbors won't help. I told you, we owe money, and Reeves has made it clear that helping us means crossing him. Not talking about neighbors, talking about the law. The sheriff's in Reeves's pocket, you said so yourself. Not talking about the sheriff either. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, thinking. There's a federal marshal works out of Helena, named Samuel Hendricks. Knew him back when I was still wearing a badge. He's honest, or was last I heard. If we can get word to him about what's happening here, the illegal dam, the intimidation, maybe even about James's death, he might investigate. And how do we get word to Helena? That's 4 days' ride, and Reeves is watching this place. Anyone leaves, he'll know. Not anyone. Me. Ethan met her eyes. I leave tonight. Ride hard. I can make Helena in 3 days. File a formal complaint, get Hendricks moving this direction. By the time I get back, maybe we'll have federal law on our side instead of just local corruption. Margaret stared at him. You'd leave? After everything you said about standing together? I'd leave to get help. There's a difference. Margaret, we can't win this alone. 3 of us against Reeves and however many men he wants to hire. Eventually, he'll just wait us out, starve us out, or burn us out. But if we've got a federal marshal investigating, if there's official attention on this situation, Reeves has to be careful. Has to think twice before doing something that'll bring down trouble he can't buy his way out of. She turned away, looking out the window at Lucy playing in the creek, at the water flowing free, at the small victory they'd won that felt suddenly fragile. And if he comes while you're gone? If he doesn't wait? Then you do what you did this morning. You stand. You fight if you have to. You survive until I get back. Cole, I can barely hold that rifle steady. Lucy's 8 years old. We're not fighters. You stood down 6 armed men this morning. You're stronger than you think. He crossed to her, voice gentle but firm. But you're right that you need better odds. So here's what we do. I don't leave tonight. I leave tomorrow night, after I've taught you some things. How to shoot straight, how to fortify better, how to watch for approach. 1 day of preparation, then I ride. Margaret closed her eyes, shoulders tight with tension. I hate this. I hate that my daughter has to learn to shoot. I hate that we're preparing for violence. I hate that doing something as simple as reclaiming our own water means living in fear. I know, but hating it don't change it. And right now, preparation's the best protection you've got. She nodded slowly, opened her eyes. Then teach me. Teach us both. Make sure we can defend this place if we have to. The rest of that day and all the next, Ethan worked. He showed Margaret how to load the rifle properly, how to brace against recoil, how to aim for center mass instead of trying for fancy shots. She was a poor marksman at first, flinching at the noise, jerking the trigger. But she learned fast, driven by necessity and the fierce determination of someone who'd already lost too much. Lucy, he taught different things. How to spot riders at distance, how to stay low and quiet, where to hide if men came with bad intentions. The root cellar, barely big enough for a child, with a board that could be pulled over the entrance. He hated teaching a little girl these things, hated the necessity, but he did it anyway because pretending the danger wasn't real would only get them killed. If men come and they're not friendly, he told Lucy, his voice serious, you get to that cellar and you stay there. Don't come out for nothing except your mama's voice. Not mine, not anyone else's, just hers. Understand? Lucy nodded, pale but focused. What if they hurt Mama? The question hit like a fist. Ethan crouched down to her level. Your mama's tougher than she looks, and she's got the rifle now, knows how to use it. But Lucy, if the worst happens, if things go real bad, you stay hidden until they leave, then you run to Mercy, find Dr. Brennan, tell him everything. Can you do that? I can do that. Her voice was small but steady. But you're coming back, right? After you get the marshal? That's the plan. Plans can change. Papa had plans too. Ethan looked at this child who'd learned too young that plans meant nothing against the cruelty of circumstance, that fathers didn't always come home, that promises broke as easily as bones. He wanted to give her certainty, wanted to swear nothing would happen, but lies wouldn't help her survive. Yeah, he said honestly, plans can change, but I'm good at staying alive, and I'm good at coming back when I say I will. So you trust that, all right? Trust that I'm not your papa, and I know what I'm up against. She studied him with those old eyes, then threw her arms around his neck in a sudden fierce hug. I trust you. Just just be careful. He patted her back awkwardly, this affection still strange to him, still painful in ways he couldn't name. I will. You be careful too. That evening, after Lucy had gone to bed exhausted from practice and fear, Margaret and Ethan sat at the table with coffee in silence. The lamp burned low. Outside, the creek sang its return song, water over stones, life flowing where there'd been death. I've been thinking, Margaret said finally, about what happens after. If we survive this. If the marshal helps. If Reeves backs down. What then? Then you rebuild. Get the farm running proper. Raise your daughter. Live the life you and James wanted. And you? Where do you go? The question hung between them, weighted with things unspoken. Ethan looked at his coffee, at his scarred hands wrapped around the cup, at everything except her face. Don't know yet. Hadn't thought past getting through this. That's not true. Her voice was quiet but certain. You've been thinking about it. I can see it when you look at Lucy, when you fix things around here. You're thinking about staying. He met her eyes then. Would that be wrong? If I was thinking about it? No, it wouldn't be wrong. She paused, choosing words carefully. Cole, I need to be honest with you about what this is, what it can be. I care about you. You've saved our lives, literally and otherwise. Lucy adores you, and I... She stopped, started again. I'm grateful, so grateful. But I buried my husband 18 months ago, and I'm not ready for... I can't offer you... I'm not asking for anything, Ethan interrupted gently. I know you're still grieving James. I know this is complicated. I ain't expecting romance or promises or anything except maybe a place to be useful, a place to matter. Relief washed across her face. Then if you want to stay, after this is done, there's a place for you here. Not as anything except someone we trust, someone who's family in the ways that count. Family. The word felt foreign in his mouth, sharp-edged, dangerous. Family meant caring. Caring meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant pain when things went wrong, and things always went wrong eventually. But sitting there in the lamplight in this rough cabin with a woman who'd stood beside him against impossible odds, and a child sleeping peacefully because she finally felt safe, maybe vulnerability was worth the risk. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. Being family. Margaret smiled, tired but genuine. Then come back from Helena, come back safe, and we'll figure out the rest together. They sat a while longer, not talking, just being present with each other. Then Ethan stood, knowing he needed rest before the long ride ahead. At the door to his storage room, he paused. Margaret, thank you for trusting me, for standing with me, for, he gestured vaguely, for all of it. Thank you for stopping, she said softly, for being the one person who didn't ride past. He nodded and slipped outside. The night was clear, stars thick as spilled salt. Ethan stood breathing the cool air, listening to the creek, feeling the weight of tomorrow's journey settling on his shoulders. 4 days to Helena and back, maybe 5 if he pushed hard. 4 or 5 days when anything could happen, when Reeves could move, when Margaret and Lucy would be alone except for a rifle and whatever courage they could muster. It was a risk, a terrible risk. But staying was a slow death, a siege they'd eventually lose. At least this way they had a chance. At least this way they were fighting instead of just enduring. He slept fitfully that night, dreams full of fire and screaming and arriving too late, always too late. Woke before dawn to find his hands clenched and his jaw aching from grinding his teeth. The old nightmares, never far away, reminding him what failure cost. But he pushed them down, focused on present. Packed light, bedroll, food for the trail, ammunition, canteen. Left most of his supplies for Margaret and Lucy. Saddled the mare in darkness, checked her shoes, her legs, made sure she was sound for hard travel. Margaret emerged as he was cinching the saddle, Lucy trailing behind her still in her nightgown. They stood watching him work, 3 people who'd become something like family in the space of 2 weeks, now facing separation that might be permanent. Remember what I taught you, Ethan said, not looking at them, afraid if he did, his resolve would crack. Keep watch. Trust your instincts. If anything feels wrong, it probably is. We'll be careful, Margaret promised. And you ride fast but not reckless. Helena's no good to us if you get there dead. I'll be careful too. He swung into the saddle, finally met her eyes. 4 days? 5 at most. Then I'm back with help, or I'm back alone, but I'm back. That's a promise. Lucy stepped forward, grabbed his stirrup. You always keep your promises? I try to. Can't always control circumstances, but I try. Then I'll see you in 5 days. She said it like conviction, like speaking it made it true. Yeah, Lucy, you'll see me in 5 days. He rode out as the sun broke the horizon, turning the sky gold and pink and orange. Didn't look back because looking back made leaving harder. Just set his face east toward Helena and let the mare find her pace, eating miles, putting distance between himself and the 2 people he'd somehow come to care about, despite every intention to stay detached. The first day passed in hard riding. Ethan pushed through heat and fatigue, stopped only to water the mare and rest her briefly. Saw no one, which was both relief and worry. Where were Reeves's men? Were they watching the cabin? Following him? Waiting somewhere ahead? He made camp that night in a dry wash, no fire, jerky, and water for dinner. Slept with his gun in hand, every sound jerking him awake. But nothing came except dawn, and he rode on. The second day was worse. The mare was tired, and he couldn't push her as hard without risking injury. They made slower time, and Ethan's mind raced with scenarios, each worse than the last. Margaret facing down armed men alone. Lucy hiding in the root cellar while the cabin burned above her. Arriving back to find graves instead of people. Stop it, he told himself. Focus on the job. Get to Helena. Get Hendricks. Get back. But the fears wouldn't quiet, and he knew why. He cared. Despite every wall he'd built, despite 6 years of telling himself not to get attached, he cared about Margaret Hale and her daughter. Cared enough that the thought of them hurt or killed made his chest tight and his hands shake. Dangerous, that. But also strangely right. Like a piece of himself he'd buried was clawing back to life. He reached Helena late on the 3rd day, the mare stumbling with exhaustion. Found the federal office, a small building near the territorial courthouse. Hammered on the door until a clerk answered, annoyed and suspicious. Marshal Hendricks, Ethan said. I need to see him, now. The marshal don't see people without appointments. Then make an exception. Tell him Ethan Cole needs to talk to him about water rights, illegal dams, and possible murder in Mercy. Tell him it's urgent. Something in his voice, in his face, made the clerk hesitate. Wait here. 10 minutes later, Ethan stood in a spare office, facing a man he hadn't seen in 7 years. Samuel Hendricks had aged, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but the sharp intelligence was the same, and the integrity that had made him one of the few lawmen Ethan had ever trusted completely. Cole. Hendricks stood, hand extended. Heard you'd left Wyoming. Heard you'd quit the law. I did. Both. Ethan shook his hand briefly. But I need your help. People I care about are in danger, and local law won't touch it because the man threatening them owns the sheriff. Sit. Tell me everything. Ethan did. Every detail. Lucy collapsing at his feet, Margaret's fever, the dam, Reeves's threats, the confrontation, James Hale's convenient death. He spoke for 20 minutes without pause, laying out the case methodically, the way he'd once presented evidence in court. Hendricks listened, face neutral, fingers steepled. When Ethan finished, the marshal sat silent for a long moment. Caleb Reeves, he said finally. Yeah, I know the name. Rich, connected, smart enough not to get caught at anything directly. If he killed James Hale, he did it clean. And water rights disputes. They're messy, Cole. Hard to prove, hard to enforce, and territorial judges don't like getting involved. So you won't help. Ethan felt something die in his chest. Didn't say that. Hendricks leaned forward. I said it's messy, but if there's an illegal dam diverting water from homesteaders with prior rights, that's federal jurisdiction. Interstate commerce implications, territorial regulations. I can investigate that. And if I happen to look into other irregularities while I'm investigating the dam, well, that's just thorough police work. Hope sparked. You'll come? I'll come. But Colt, you need to understand, investigation takes time. I can't just ride in and arrest Reeves on your word. I need evidence, witnesses, documentation. And even then, if he's as connected as you say, prosecution might not stick. I just need you there. Just need official eyes on the situation. Reeves can kill a widow and a drifter and nobody'll care. But he can't kill a federal marshal without consequences. True enough. Hendricks stood, reached for his coat. I'll ride out tomorrow. Bring a deputy. Should reach Mercy in 3 days. Make it 2, please. I've been gone 3 days already. If Reeves moves while I'm not there, then you better ride back fast. Hendricks met his eyes. And Cole? Be ready for this to get ugly. Men like Reeves don't give up easy, and federal investigation might push him to do something desperate before I arrive. I know, but it's still better than doing nothing. Maybe. Hendricks walked him to the door. One more thing, you carrying a badge these days? No, turned mine in 7 years ago. Might want to consider picking one up again. Even temporary, even just for this. Makes everything cleaner legally if you have to defend those people. Ethan shook his head. I'm done being a lawman. I'm just someone helping folks who need help. Sometimes that's the same thing. Sometimes, not always. They parted with an agreement. Hendricks would ride out at dawn, would reach Mercy in 2 days, would investigate thoroughly. It was the best Ethan could hope for. Now he just had to get back before everything fell apart. He left Helena before midnight, knowing the mare needed rest but unable to wait. Pushed through darkness and exhaustion, following the trail by moonlight and memory. Made terrible time but couldn't stop, couldn't rest, couldn't quiet the voice in his head screaming that he was already too late. Dawn of the 4th day found him still 30 miles from Mercy, the mare nearly spent. He walked her through the worst heat, rode when he could, bargained with the universe for just a little more time. As the sun set, he could see the landmarks he recognized, the ridge lines that meant he was close. Full dark when he finally approached the Hale property, every muscle screaming, his mind numb with fatigue and dread. He smelled smoke before he saw anything, and his heart stopped. The cabin came into view, and relief hit him like a fist. Not burning, still standing. The smoke was from the stovepipe, just cooking fire, just normal life. Lamplight in the window, no sign of violence, destruction, death. Ethan nearly fell from the saddle, legs barely supporting him. Staggered to the door, raised a hand to knock, and it flew open before he could. Lucy stood there, took one look at him, and screamed, "Mama! Mama! He's back! Cole came back!" Then Margaret was there, taking in his condition, barely standing, covered in trail dust, swaying with exhaustion. She grabbed his arm, pulled him inside. 4 days, she said, voice shaking. You said 4 or 5. It's only been 4. You must have ridden yourself nearly to death. Had to get back. Had to make sure. He couldn't finish, just stood there breathing hard, looking at them both alive and whole and safe. We're fine, Margaret said gently. Nothing happened. Reeves hasn't come, hasn't sent anyone. It's been quiet. Too quiet. That worries me. Later. Right now you need to sit down before you fall down. She guided him to a chair, and he dropped into it gratefully. Lucy brought water, and he drank, tasting dust and metal and relief. The marshal? Margaret asked. Coming. 2 days. Him and a deputy. Federal investigation into the dam, into everything. Ethan set down the cup. But Margaret, Hendricks was right. Reeves might move before they arrive. Might try to end this quick before federal law gets involved. Then we'll be ready. She said it calmly, like stating fact. You taught us how. And now you're back. Whatever comes, we face it together, like you said. Lucy climbed into his lap, unasked, and wrapped thin arms around his neck. You kept your promise. You came back. Ethan held her awkwardly, this child who trusted him despite every reason not to trust adults who left. Over her head, he met Margaret's eyes. Yeah, he said quietly. I came back. And I'm staying until this is finished. Then rest tonight. Tomorrow we prepare. Margaret's jaw was set, her eyes hard. Because if Reeves is coming, I want to be ready. I want him to understand that we're not victims anymore. We're fighters. Ethan nodded, too tired for words. Lucy finally climbed down, and he forced himself to his feet, to the storage room, to his bedroll. Collapsed onto it, fully dressed, gun within reach, ears tuned to any sound that didn't belong. He'd made it back. They were alive. The marshal was coming. But the hardest part was still ahead, and all of them knew it. The storm was gathering, and soon, very soon, it would break with a fury that would test everything they'd built, everything they'd become. But for tonight, they were together. For tonight, that was enough. Morning came too soon, harsh sunlight streaming through the gaps in the walls, pulling Ethan from dreams of smoke and gunfire. He woke with his hand already on his revolver, heart pounding, before memory caught up and he remembered where he was. Safe. For now. He emerged from the storage room to find Margaret already up, coffee made, bread baking in the stove. She looked at him with concern that quickly shifted to assessment. You look better than last night. Better than... Still terrible, but better. Feel like I've been dragged behind a horse for 4 days. He accepted the coffee she poured, let the heat and bitterness clear his head. But I'll manage. We got work to do before Hendricks arrives. What kind of work? The kind that makes sure we're still alive when he gets here. Ethan moved to the window, looking out at the property with tactical eyes. Reeves knows I went somewhere. His men have been watching. You said it's been quiet, but quiet means they're waiting, planning. Once they figure out I went to Helena, once they realize federal law's coming, they'll move fast. Margaret set down her own cup, face tight. When? Today. Tomorrow at latest. They can't afford to wait for Hendricks to arrive and start asking questions about illegal dams and convenient accidents. He turned to face her. We need to be ready for a siege, and we need witnesses. Witnesses to what? To whatever happens. If Reeves comes with violence, we need people who'll testify, who'll tell Hendricks what they saw. People he can't intimidate or buy off. Cole, I told you, the neighbors won't help. They're too scared, too indebted. Not talking about neighbors, talking about Dr. Brennan. Margaret blinked. The doctor? Why would he help us? Because he's already in this, whether he knows it or not. He treated you, knows Reeves tried to let you die through neglect. He's seen what power does in this county, and from what I saw of him, he's got more spine than most. Ethan drained his coffee. I'm writing to Mercy this morning, gonna ask him to come stay here until the marshal arrives. Having a respected town doctor present changes the calculation, makes it harder for Reeves to do something he can't explain away. He might refuse. He might, but I'm gonna ask anyway. He checked his guns, reloaded from habit. While I'm gone, you and Lucy stay inside. Door barred, rifle loaded. Anyone approaches who's not me or Brennan, you don't open up. Understood? We'll be careful. Margaret hesitated, then crossed to him. Cole, if Brennan won't come, if you can't convince him, what then? Then we hold out until Hendricks arrives and hope that's enough. He met her eyes, saw the fear she was trying to hide, the weight of responsibility she carried for Lucy. But we're gonna be fine, Margaret. We've come too far to fail now. She nodded, not quite convinced, but trusting him anyway. Then go, and come back quick. The ride to Mercy took an hour, Ethan pushing the mare harder than he should have, but unable to help it. Every minute away from the cabin was a minute Margaret and Lucy were vulnerable. He kept expecting to see riders, to round a bend and find Reeves's men waiting, but the trail stayed empty. Town was busy with mid-morning commerce, people going about their lives unaware or uncaring that a few miles away, violence was gathering like a storm. Ethan found Brennan's house and dismounted, knocked hard. The doctor's wife answered, recognition and disapproval warring on her face. Mr. Cole, what do you want? Need to speak to your husband. It's urgent. Dr. Brennan is with a patient. Then I'll wait. Ethan pushed past her, not rudely, but firmly, into the front parlor. But I ain't leaving until I talk to him. She made a sound of protest, but didn't try to stop him. 10 minutes later, Brennan appeared, medical bag in hand, irritation clear on his face. Mr. Cole, Catherine says you forced your way in. I knocked and entered when she answered. That ain't forcing. Ethan stood. I need your help. Need you to come to the Hale place and stay there until the federal marshal arrives. Brennan stared. The federal? What are you talking about? Marshal Samuel Hendricks out of Helena. I rode there, filed a complaint about illegal water diversion, intimidation, possibly murder. He's coming to investigate, should be here tomorrow. But Reeves knows I left, probably knows where I went. He'll move before Hendricks arrives, try to settle this permanent. And you want me there as what? A witness? A presence, a respected doctor who'll testify to what he sees. Reeves might risk killing a drifter and a widow, but killing or threatening you, that brings consequences he can't buy his way out of. Brennan set down his bag slowly. You're asking me to put myself between Caleb Reeves and something he wants badly enough to kill for. Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Why would I do that? I've got a practice here, a wife, a life. Getting involved in your fight could cost me everything. Because it's the right thing to do. Ethan kept his voice level. Because Margaret Hale almost died while people who could have helped stood by and did nothing. Because her husband was murdered and everyone knows it, but nobody'll say it. Because sometimes being a doctor means more than treating sickness. It means standing up when people need you. That's easy to say when it's not your life on the line. It is my life on the line. I'm the one who tore down the dam. I'm the one who brought in federal law. I'm the one who'll catch the first bullet if Reeves comes with violence. Ethan stepped closer. I ain't asking you to fight, just asking you to be there, to see, to tell the truth about what you see. Brennan looked at him for a long moment, internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he shook his head. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't risk my family for people I barely know. Disappointment sat heavy in Ethan's chest, but he nodded. All right, I understand. Just, when Hendricks gets here, if things have gone bad, you tell him the truth. Tell him I asked for help and couldn't get it. Tell him Reeves owns this whole county. He turned to leave. Got 3 steps before Brennan's voice stopped him. Wait, the doctor stood, hands clenched. If I do this, if I come, you swear to me that you'll do everything possible to avoid violence? That you won't provoke Reeves, won't give him excuse? I'll avoid violence if I can, but if he brings it, I'll meet it. I got a woman and child to protect, and I won't let them die to spare anyone's conscience. Fair enough. Brennan picked up his bag again. Give me 10 minutes to pack supplies and tell Catherine, then I'll ride with you. Relief hit hard. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This might be the stupidest decision I've ever made. But there was something else in Brennan's eyes now. Determination, maybe even the faint spark of righteousness. I've watched Reeves run roughshod over this county for too long. Watched good people suffer because he's rich and connected. If there's finally a chance to hold him accountable, to stand witness against him, maybe it's worth the risk. They rode back together, Brennan on his own horse, quiet and tense. Halfway there, he spoke. Mrs. Hale, how is she recovering? Stronger each day? The fever's completely gone. She's eating well, getting her strength back. Good. She's a strong woman, stronger than she knows. Brennan paused. I treated her husband once, years ago, broken ribs from a fall. James Hale was a good man, honest, hardworking. His death, I never believed the official story. Why didn't you say something? To who? The sheriff who takes money from Reeves? The judge who owes him favors? I'm just a doctor, Mr. Cole. I've got no power here. His voice turned bitter. Or I told myself I didn't. Easier to stay silent, stay safe, pretend I couldn't make a difference. You're making one now. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just putting off a guilty conscience for a few more days. Brennan looked at him. You really think this marshal can help? That federal law means anything against local power? I think it's our best shot, and I think doing nothing guarantees losing. They reached the cabin just past noon. Margaret opened the door at Ethan's call, surprise and relief crossing her face when she saw Brennan. Doctor, why are you here? Mr. Cole convinced me you might need medical attention, or at least medical presence. Brennan dismounted, tied his horse. I'm told a federal marshal is coming to investigate irregularities in this county. Thought I'd wait here until he arrives. Make sure everyone stays healthy. Margaret looked between them, understanding dawning. You're here as a witness. I'm here as a doctor. If witnessing happens to occur, well, that's just part of thorough medical practice. She smiled, tired but genuine. Thank you, truly. You didn't have to come. Actually, I think I did. Should have done it sooner. Brennan looked around the cabin, at the reinforced door, the rifle by the window, the tense atmosphere of people preparing for violence. But I'm here now. Let's hope my presence is unnecessary and boring. The afternoon passed in taut waiting. Ethan kept watch from the window, scanning the horizon for riders. Margaret tried to keep busy with normal tasks, but her eyes kept going to the rifle. Lucy was quieter than usual, sensing the adult's tension, staying close to her mother. Brennan sat at the table, ostensibly reading a medical journal he'd brought, but his eyes were on the door. Around 3 o'clock, Lucy spotted them first. "Riders coming, a lot of them." Ethan was at the window instantly, counting. 8 men on horseback, approaching at a walk. Reeves in the lead, Tommy beside him, 6 others Ethan didn't recognize, all armed, all serious. "Margaret, get Lucy to the cellar, now." "But, now." His voice cut like a blade. "Doctor, you stay visible in the window. I'm going out. Cole, there's 8 of them, and they're not here to talk, but they won't start shooting with a town doctor watching. That's the whole point." He checked his guns, took a breath. "Just stay visible, and if this goes bad, you tell Hendricks everything." He stepped outside before anyone could argue, closing the door behind him. Took a position in the yard, hand near his gun, but not on it, projecting calm he didn't feel. The riders pulled up 15 feet away, spreading out in a loose line. Reeves looked different than before, harder, angrier. A man pushed past patience into fury. "Mr. Cole, we need to have a conversation." "We having one now? Say what you came to say." "You went to Helena, filed complaints with the federal marshal, told lies about dams and water rights and murder." Reeves's voice was tight with controlled rage. "You had no right. This is a local matter." Water diversion across federal land makes it federal jurisdiction, and murder's always federal business when local law won't touch it. There was no murder. James Hale died in an accident. Convenient timing on that accident, day after he threatened legal action about water rights. Ethan watched the men flanking Reeves, saw Tommy's hand hovering near his gun. But a federal marshal can investigate, ask questions, find truth. Should be here tomorrow, in fact. That landed like a bomb. Reeves's face went dark. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. So whatever you came here to do, better think hard about doing it with witnesses around and federal law coming. Ethan nodded toward the window, where Brennan's face was clearly visible. Dr. Brennan's inside. Respected town doctor, watching everything. Hard to explain away violence when you've got that kind of witness. Reeves looked at the window, recognition and calculation warring on his face. His hand tightened on his reins. "You think bringing in a doctor and a marshal changes anything? You think I can't handle federal investigation? I think federal marshals ask inconvenient questions. About dams, about accidents, about who profits when homesteaders die or disappear. I think once they start investigating, they find things, and I think you're smart enough to know that. What I know is that you're a drifter with a gun playing at being a hero. What I know is that widows can't run farms alone, that little girls grow up hungry when their mothers fail, that this land is wasted on people who can't make it productive." Reeves leaned forward in his saddle. "Last chance, Cole. Take the widow and her daughter and leave. Tonight. I'll even pay your travel expenses. Generous offer, given the trouble you've caused. Not interested? Then you're choosing to die. And when you're dead, when there's no one to protect them, Mrs. Hale will sell. She'll have no choice." Ethan felt ice settle in his stomach, the cold clarity that came before violence. "You threatening to kill me in front of witnesses? In front of a town doctor? That's bold, even for you." "Accidents happen, Mr. Cole. You should know that. James Hale certainly learned." Reeves straightened. "You've got until sundown to leave. After that, I can't guarantee your safety. Montana's a dangerous place. Wild animals, cliff edges, all sorts of tragic possibilities. Sundown's 3 hours away. Marshal Hendricks will be here in less than 24. Math don't work in your favor, Reeves." "We'll see about that." Reeves pulled his reins, preparing to leave. "Boys, make sure Mr. Cole understands the gravity of his situation." Tommy grinned, scarred face twisting. "Be our pleasure, boss." "One more thing." Ethan's voice stopped them. "You come back here with violence, you better be ready to finish it. Because I don't run, and I don't quit, and I've got nothing to lose except people I've decided to protect. That makes me dangerous in ways you probably haven't considered." Reeves looked at him, really looked. Seen for maybe the first time that Ethan wasn't bluffing, wasn't posturing, wasn't playing a game he could win. "You really are willing to die for them. If it comes to that, then you're a fool." But there was something else in Reeves's voice now. Uncertainty, maybe even respect. A brave fool, but a fool nonetheless. They rode off, dust rising, leaving Ethan standing in the yard with his heart hammering and his hands shaking from adrenaline he couldn't release. He waited until they were out of sight, then went back inside. Margaret was at the top of the cellar stairs, Lucy behind her, both pale but composed. Brennan stood by the window, face grim. "Well," the doctor said, "that was illuminating and terrifying." "He'll be back." Ethan crossed to the window, watching the horizon. "Sundown, or just after. He can't wait for Hendricks to arrive. Has to make his move tonight." "Then we prepare." Margaret's voice was steady. "Like you taught me. We prepare and we hold until morning." The hours until sunset were the longest of Ethan's life. They fortified further, moving furniture to create barriers, filling containers with water in case of fire, making sure ammunition was accessible. Brennan helped, despite his obvious fear, following Ethan's directions, asking intelligent questions about defensive positions. "I'm a doctor, not a soldier," he said at one point. "I've never shot at another human being." "Hope you don't have to tonight. But if it comes to it, you aim for center mass and you don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed." Lucy. They put in the cellar early, over her protests. Margaret knelt beside the small opening, speaking quietly to her daughter. "You stay here, baby. No matter what you hear, you stay here until Mama or Cole comes for you. Understand?" "I understand." Lucy's voice was small but brave. "Mama, I love you. I love you too. So much." Margaret kissed her forehead, then pulled the board over the entrance, stood looking at it for a long moment, composing herself, then turned to face the men. "All right, I'm ready." Sunset came in shades of orange and red, the sky bleeding color like a wound. Ethan positioned himself by the front window, Margaret at the side, Brennan at the back. The light faded slowly, shadows lengthening, tension ratcheting higher with each passing minute. Full dark fell. An hour passed. 2. Nothing. "Maybe he's not coming," Brennan said quietly. "Maybe the threat was enough." "He's coming." Ethan didn't take his eyes from the window. "Just waiting, making us nervous, hoping we'll relax." Another hour, then faint in the distance the sound of horses. Multiple horses, moving slow and careful. Ethan's hand tightened on his rifle. "Here we go. Remember, don't shoot unless they shoot first. We need them to be the aggressors. Need this to be clear self-defense." The riders materialized from darkness, maybe a dozen this time, more than before. Reeves had brought reinforcements, men who'd do what needed doing for the right price. They spread out in a wide circle around the cabin, cutting off escape routes, preparing for... Fire bloomed in 3 places at once. Torches arcing through the air, landing on the roof, against the walls, spreading fast across dry timber. "Fire!" Margaret screamed, moving toward the cellar. "No!" Ethan grabbed her. "That's what they want. We go outside, they shoot us. We stay inside, we burn. Either way, we lose Lucy." "Then what do we do?" Gunshots answered, bullets punching through the walls, through the windows, the sound deafening in the small space. Ethan pulled Margaret down, returned fire, saw a shape fall from a horse. Brennan was at the back window, not shooting but watching, witnessing. More fire. The roof was catching now, flames spreading, smoke filling the cabin. Heat building, Lucy screaming from the cellar, terrified but still hidden. They had minutes, maybe less, before the structure became an oven. "We have to get her out." Margaret was crying now, desperate. "We have to..." "Cellar opens outside, back of the cabin." Ethan made a decision, the only decision available. "I'm going out, gonna draw their fire. Give you time to get Lucy and run for the creek. The cottonwoods. Hide there, wait for Hendricks." "Colt, no. No choice. Doctor, you go with them. Get them safe, then get to Hendricks. Tell him everything." He looked at Margaret, smoke stinging his eyes, time running out. "I'm sorry. I promised I'd keep you safe, but you did keep us safe. You gave us a chance." She grabbed his face, kissed him hard and quick. "Don't die. Please don't die." Then she was moving, calling for Lucy, and Brennan was helping, and Ethan was at the door, rifle in one hand, revolver in the other, preparing to step into hell. He kicked the door open and came out shooting. The night exploded into chaos, muzzle flashes, screaming horses, men cursing and diving for cover. Ethan fired methodically, not trying for kills, but for confusion, for time, for space. Saw movement to his left and pivoted, shot hitting something that cried out. Felt a bullet whine past his ear, another tug at his sleeve. Behind him, Margaret and Lucy were running, Brennan shepherding them toward the creek. Most of the riders were focused on Ethan, the immediate threat, but two broke away to pursue. Ethan shot one from his horse, the other made it 10 yards before Brennan, quiet, peaceful Dr. Brennan, picked up a fallen rifle and shot him in the leg. Then Reeves was there on foot, gun drawn, face twisted with rage. "You stubborn bastard! You couldn't just leave. Couldn't just let you win." Ethan's revolver was empty, rifle nearly so. He was bleeding from somewhere, couldn't tell where. "Your move, Reeves!" For a frozen second, they stood facing each other across smoke and firelight, two men who'd chosen different paths to the same moment. Then Reeves raised his gun. The shot came from the darkness beyond the firelight. Not Reeves's gun. Another one, the crack sharp and authoritative. Reeves staggered, looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, looked up in shock. "Federal Marshal!" a voice called from the darkness. "Everyone drop your weapons, now!" Riders scattered, some throwing down guns, others fleeing into the night. Reeves collapsed to his knees, still holding his weapon, still trying to raise it. Samuel Hendricks emerged from the shadows, rifle-trained, deputy beside him. "I said drop it, Reeves." The gun fell from nerveless fingers. Reeves toppled sideways, breathing shallow, eyes wide with the understanding that he'd finally pushed too far, that power had limits, that consequences had found him. Hendricks crossed to Ethan, took in the blood, the smoke, the burning cabin. "You all right, Cole?" "I'll live. The others, Margaret and Lucy." "Safe. We saw them by the creek on our way in. Dr. Brennan's with them." Hendricks looked at the chaos around them, at the men being rounded up by his deputy, at Reeves bleeding out in the dust. "We pushed hard, got here a day early. Good thing, too." "Yeah, good thing." Ethan sat down hard, adrenaline crashing, pain catching up. "Reeves?" "He's done. Shot him when he was about to kill you. Clear self-defense, and we've got a dozen witnesses to attempted murder, arson, conspiracy." Hendricks knelt beside him. "You're bleeding pretty good, Cole. Let me get the doctor." "In a minute. First I need to see them. Need to know they're really safe." Hendricks helped him up, supported him to the creek where Margaret and Lucy huddled under the cottonwoods, Brennan standing guard. When Lucy saw Ethan, she broke away from her mother and ran, hitting him so hard he nearly fell. "You're alive! You're alive!" "Yeah, Lucy, I'm alive." He held her carefully, aware of his wounds, of her fragility, of how close this had come to ending differently. Over her head, he met Margaret's eyes. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her face, but smiling too. "You kept your promise. You came back." "Always," he said. "I'll always come back." The next hours were a blur. Brennan treating wounds, Ethan had taken a bullet through his shoulder, another had grazed his ribs, plus burns and cuts. Hendricks taking statements, arresting men, establishing federal authority. The cabin burning itself out, becoming a smoking ruin. Reeves died just before dawn, bleeding out despite Brennan's efforts. His last words were curses and threats, empty and impotent. Tommy and 4 others were arrested for attempted murder. The rest scattered, but Hendricks had their names, their descriptions. They'd be found. As the sun rose, painting the sky gold, Ethan sat with Margaret and Lucy under the cottonwoods, watching smoke rise from what had been their home. Lucy was asleep in her mother's lap, exhausted. Margaret leaned against Ethan's uninjured side. "The cabin's gone," she said quietly. "Everything we had. We'll rebuild. Better this time, stronger." He was so tired he could barely form words. "And we'll do it legal, proper, with federal backing. Hendricks says he'll make sure your water rights are enforced, that nobody bothers you again." "What about you? Where will you go?" Ethan thought about that. About drifting, about moving on, about 6 years of running from attachment and pain. Thought about Lucy's arms around him, about Margaret standing beside him against impossible odds, about fighting for something instead of just surviving. "Thought I might stay," he said, "if that's still all right with you." Margaret turned to look at him, searching his face. "Just to help rebuild?" "To rebuild. To work the land. To be—" He struggled for words. "To be part of something. Part of a family. If you'll have me." "Cole, I told you, I'm not ready for romance, for a husband. James is still—" "I know. I ain't asking for that. I'm asking to stay. To help raise Lucy, work the farm, be someone you can count on. Whatever that looks like, however long it takes." He met her eyes. I'm done drifting, Margaret. I'm done running. This place, you and Lucy, you're worth staying for, worth fighting for. That's enough. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then stay. Be part of our family. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Lucy stirred, opened sleepy eyes, saw them sitting together, saw the ruins of the cabin, saw the new day dawning. What happens now? Now we rebuild, Margaret said, stroking her daughter's hair. We start over. We make something better. And Cole stays? Cole stays. Lucy smiled, closed her eyes again, settled back into sleep. Ethan sat watching the sunrise, feeling Margaret's warmth beside him, hearing Lucy's peaceful breathing. His shoulder throbbed, his ribs ached, his whole body felt like one giant bruise, but underneath the pain was something else, something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Purpose. Belonging. Home. The road had been long and hard, had started with a girl collapsing in the dust, begging a stranger not to ride away, had led through fever and dams and confrontation and fire, had cost blood and pain and nearly cost lives. But it had brought him here, to this moment, sitting under cottonwoods with people who'd become family, watching a new day begin. Ethan Cole had spent 6 years drifting, running from grief, from failure, from the memory of arriving too late. But sometimes the right place to stop found you when you least expected it. Sometimes redemption wasn't about fixing the past, but about choosing to matter in the present. Sometimes home wasn't a place you were born, but a place you decided to stay. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last shadows. In the distance, Hendricks was organizing his prisoners, preparing to transport them to Helena for trial. Doctor. Brennan was packing his supplies, talking about coming back to help with rebuilding. The creek ran clear and free, water flowing where it belonged, giving life to land that had almost died. And in the shade of the cottonwoods, a man who'd stopped running, a woman who'd refused to quit, and a child who'd been brave beyond her years sat together, alive, safe, whole. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by shared hardship, by the simple decision to stand together when everything said to fall apart. The cabin was ashes, but ashes made good soil for new growth, and they had time, had each other, had a future that stretched out like the Montana plains, vast and open and full of possibility. Ethan closed his eyes, let exhaustion finally claim him, and slept without nightmares for the first time in 6 years. When he woke, Margaret and Lucy were still there, watching over him like he'd watched over them. Still there. Still his family. Still home. The rest would come. Rebuilding, recovery, learning to be part of something bigger than himself. But for now, this moment was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The story that began with a desperate plea beneath a merciless sun ended in the cool shade of cottonwoods, with water flowing and hope renewed, and 3 people who'd found in each other what they'd thought they'd lost forever. Not rescue, but partnership. Not salvation, but belonging. Not the end of hardship, but the strength to face it together. And sometimes that was the best kind of miracle there was.